Hi and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to talk about my favorite non-fictions of 2022. Maybe you've already seen my video about my favorite fictions of last year, and there are 3 reasons why I made 2 lists this year. The first one is that when I initially started making these lists, I quickly realized that half of the favorite books of 2022 were non-fictions. And obviously this wasn't a real issue, it was just hard putting them up against each other. And the second thing is a bit related, because 2022 was the year when I fell a bit in love with this genre. I no longer thought of this genre as just being full of autobiographies by former presidents, or just war in general. And the last reason why I had to make 2 separate lists will come later in the video. Let's get this show on the road. The first one on the list is this one, An Ode to Darkness by C.G. Sandberg. This was recommended to me early last year and I'm very happy I picked it up. It's about darkness and the author herself travels high up in the mountains where there's no electricity to befriend it, because she doesn't really like darkness. The story switches between her own and this Austrian painter and writer called Christiane Ritter. She moved to Svalbard, which is a very dark place, and wrote about it. With these 2 perspectives, the book talks about darkness, but also the things we associate with darkness, like depression, for example. I've just thought about this book a whole lot since I read it, and basically that's why it's on the list. I find the topic to be very interesting and something I think about often, but also it's the way that Sandberg takes her own experiences and transfer it to have bigger meaning. She talks about darkness and then puts it in a bigger context. It's a very light read and it's split up into the days that she spent on this cabin. It also made me want to read Christiane Ritter's novel about her stay at Svalbard. And basically I think about this book each time I'm in really dark places. Not mentally. And the darkness continues with another favorite, and that's Chasing the Scream by Johann Hari. This is all about the war on drugs, and in the historical context. So basically this is a book about people that have suffered, and people that have made other people suffer. And one of the people that have made other people suffer and suffered himself is the author, because he was an up-and-coming journalist and then he started plagiarizing. Then he went underground for some years while he wrote this book. And one effect of that behavior is that this book is filled with footnotes and notes. So by doing this, it made me feel like I read a book that was factual, at least. The big reason why this is on the list is because of the storytelling. There are so many captivating characters and difficult fates. Also a bunch of cliffhangers after each chapter. I think the reason why it's easy to write compelling about this topic is because you have so many individual fates. For example, it mentions Billie Holiday and her drug abuse, and it talks about why she had a drug abuse. Also you read about the people that are producing the drugs or shipping the drugs to a new country and what happens to their families if they don't. It's a powerful novel, but also a difficult one to read at times just because of all the human suffering. But I do recommend it, and when I finished reading it, I actually wrote down that something really good must have happened to my reading life if this wasn't a part of my top 10 for this year or last year. The next one is the shortest one on the list, and that's Roskilde by Linn Strømsborg. She's a Norwegian author, and Roskilde is a Danish music festival. I read this novel whilst being at the festival in Belgium, and I think that affected my reading in a positive way. So this is all about her traveling to this festival that she goes to each year with her friends, and the planning and what they did there and who they saw performing and what they did afterwards. Many people I know struggle to understand why I like going to music festivals. It might rain, you might get cold, you sleep in a tent, all those things. So the reason why I love this novel is how it doesn't sugarcoat anything, but still makes me really want to visit a new festival again. I think it's that simple. She talks about sleeping too little, drinking too much, going to concerts she loves, meeting new people, meeting them again next year, going home by bus, and then waiting for next year to happen. And I just loved it. But I do think that if you really love festivals, this is the book for you. If you hate festivals, I don't know if this book will persuade you, but I loved it. Then I'll give you a third reason why I had to make a separate non-fiction list for this year, and that's this guy, Fredrik Backman. And of course he already had 2 books on my fiction favorites for 2022. I felt almost I couldn't have 3. Just felt a bit weird. But this is Things My Son Needs to Know About the World. And all he does in this novel is write a bunch of things that his son needs to know about. In a funny way. the reason probably why he's on the list today is because it's also in an emotional way. Because it's not like Fredrik Backman in this novel writes about anything I care about. He writes about football and IKEA, little things in general, but he does it in such a emotionally impactful way that I found myself sitting on the subway crying a bit. Which was my first crying experience with the book, I think. The book starts like this. To my son, I want to apologize for everything I'm going to do over the next 18 or so years. For everything I'll miss, everything I won't understand, all the notes about parent-teacher conferences you won't want to show me. And the introduction ends like this. Whenever I'm difficult, whenever I'm embarrassing, understandable, unfair, I want you to think back to that day. The day when you refused to tell me where the hell you'd hidden my damn car keys, and I want you to remember that it was you who started it. Your dad. I just fell a bit in love with this novel. It's very cliché, and a lot of people wrote on Goodreads that they expected to learn something from this novel, but they didn't. And I can guarantee you that you won't. It's not that kind of book. It's just wholesome, I think. And that's why it's on the list. And of course, if you watch my videos, and especially the last one, you understand that Fredrik Backman probably is my favorite author, so. And if you have been anywhere near my channel for the last year, you know that this video will contain Knausgård. So the bronze medal for last year's nonfiction goes to Knausgård and My Struggle number 5. The only Knausgård novel that I don't own in the My Struggle series. Knausgård obviously wrote about his own life, and in the 5th novel he's a student in Bergen, and he's pretty much drunk all the time, and he goes to classes with Jon Fosse, for example, and he really wants to become an author. I think this one has become my favorite university novel of all time, without him being too much at the university. With this one, as the rest of the My Struggle series, I'm not quite sure why I liked it. I think this one is my favorite because it contains a lot more excitement. He does a whole lot of stupid things. He has a love life that he struggles with. He wants to become a writer, meets authors, talks about other books. There's just a lot of things going on. Also at this point I'd read the 4 first ones and I felt like I knew him in a way. And basically all this combined is why I think it peaked at the 5th novel. And then it took a gruesome turn with the 6th one. And the silver medal goes to an author that has a tad more self-discipline than Knausgård, and that is Haruki Murakami, what I talk about when I talk about running. A book about his authorship and his feelings around his own health and running. And this one has a quite funny preface by a Norwegian author called Frode Grytten. He talks about our expectations when it comes to authors or artists in general, and what he describes is something completely different than what we get with Murakami, because he really seems like the most focused and disciplined author ever. It's written like a diary, and he draws parallels between running and writing, whereas concentration is the most important thing, for example. But he also talks about a lot more, like his jazz cafe. So the running is the leading line, but there are a lot of other topics involved. Unlike some other books on this list, I think you might enjoy this novel even though you don't like running. It has an excellent language and it is quite funny. He makes fun of himself a lot in it. Also, I do think many would think about running in another way after reading this. This novel is in no way a self-help book, but it has a lot of life lessons. But I feel like they're more towards ordinary people doing something inordinary, like running a marathon. And I really like that aspect. It's pretty down to earth. This was my first Murakami read and it made me buy like 6 other books from him. Still haven't read them, but I'm hoping that 2023 will be the year for doing so. I should also say that in this one he mentions his mini disc player like 100 times, and that's also one of the reasons why I love it. Before I started filming this video, I actually read through my notes from when I read this novel initially, and it just said, how do you describe a novel that you know will be one of your all-time favorites? So that pretty much sums it up. My number 1 non-fiction and probably my number 1 book from 2022 is Just Kids by Patti Smith. It's her memoirs from her early years and childhood, from the time she lived in New York and didn't eat anything because she couldn't afford to. It's written in a very down-to-earth way, but all the things that happen in this novel are so wild. Of course, I'm a huge Patti Smith fanboy. One of my favorite concerts has been with her. Also, she has one of my favorite records, but I didn't think that it would impact me as much. Patti Smith goes to New York and tries to become an artist. She meets Robert Mapplethorpe, which is a photographer or becomes one, and it's a love story between them, but it's also a love story about the times and New York and all the things happening in the artist scene there, because there will be a lot of name dropping after a while in this one. And for me as a fan, it was just thrilling to be a part of that journey. Patti Smith is famous for her lyrics, and probably that's a huge reason why I love this novel, but I'm just not good at pinpointing why I like the language in a novel or not. I find it difficult to talk about books that you truly love, because no matter what you say, you can't justify how much you love it. I think I'll stop right there. This was my definitive favorite read of 2022. And if you want to find out if it's for you, you'll have to read it. Obviously, I do recommend it. So there you have it, my favorite non-fictions for 2022. If you have recommendations for non-fictions I should read, please leave a comment. And especially memoirs, because that seems to be my thing. Thank you all for watching, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!